RIM has announced the Blackberry Torch 9800 smartphone running the new Blackberry 6 operating system. There's a smallish 3.2-inch low-res touchscreen, only 360 by 480, but retaining a traditional Blackberry physical keyboard tucked away in a slider design. There's also an optical trackpad, 5-megapixel camera and 4 gigabytes of onboard flash memory, plus microSD expansion and the usual top-end specs. BlackBerry 6 has a, quote, refreshed user interface with a new browser based on the same WebKit engine used in Symbian, Apple and Android systems. There's a new social messages application that tries to integrate instant messaging, Twitter and Facebook, plus there are enhancements to music and podcast services. Another phone show, the last before a small summer break. Even I'm entitled to a few days off. Thanks for all those who've been supporting me via this URL, and also don't forget the giveaways. Every 2 weeks on Phone Show Chat we give away extra view hardware, including some smartphones, so do check out this URL. Another plug for the Phone Show widget, available for S60 3rd edition and 5th edition phones. If you're a Nokia Symbian owner out there, grab this for all your Nokia phones. The Phone Show widget I've created is actually up for an award. It's in the top 10 Ovi App Wizard widgets, and the one with most downloads at the end of August gets a special prize. So if you can help me raise that download count, look for the Phone Show widget in the Ovi store. In case you haven't heard, I have decided to make the Phone Show HD, full HD, yes, by popular demand. It'll have to work via YouTube, of course, because of the huge bandwidth involved in going full HD video. But there will still be, don't worry, an MP4/iTunes version for those who don't want to go on via YouTube. So look out for that to start sometime late September, probably filmed on the Nokia N8 or the iPhone 4. Another small plug, I mentioned this about a year ago, and I've updated it recently, is my grid. It's my smartphone choosing grid. Go to this URL, enter your personal preferences for a multitude of options and functions, and the grid will hopefully interactively pop up the smartphone it thinks you should buy from the dozen or so that I've entered details for. So do give this a try. One final thing, I've got an affiliate account with ProPorter, the accessory people, in case you hadn't spotted that. If you go to their store via this URL, you get 10% off everything in their store. Cases, screen protectors, mobile chargers, adapters, 10% off everything. And also I get a small kickback to help keep the phone show on the air. So do see this URL for that. Thanks again if you've been supporting me through 2007, 8, 9, 2010. And heading now into the latter half of 2010 and 2011, what will the future bring? Stay tuned to the Phone Show.
There's been a lot of talk recently about signal bars and how badly they can degrade on some phones if you hold them wrong. What do the signal bars actually mean?
Well, the GSM standard for phones doesn't actually define the meaning of signal bars on your device, referred to in the trade as the signal quality estimate. Each manufacturer uses their own formula to work out how many bars you see, so you can't accurately compare phones using signal bars. You can, to a limited extent, compare the signal strength in different locations using the same phone, but even that isn't really reliable.
Right, thank you. So how does the manufacturer actually calculate signal bars then?
When your phone's idle, the signal quality estimate is calculated using the raw radio signal strength received from the cell tower and the signal-to-noise ratio. In most situations, the signal bars are effectively an imprecise and slow to update signal-to-noise ratio meter. But note that this is entirely based on how well the phone is receiving the cell tower's signal and tells you nothing at all about how well the tower will receive your handset signal. The two transmitters are very imbalanced in power. The cell tower can cut through a high noise environment with a high signal. But your handset, which is putting out a far weaker signal, several orders of magnitude less, probably can't.
What about when you're actually on a call or using a data connection?
Well, here the phone doesn't have to guess the effective signal quality. It's now in two-way communication and is constantly exchanging bit error rate information, as it's called, with the tower. In other words, it knows how reliably it's receiving data from the tower, and it knows how reliably the tower is receiving data from it. The information is then used to adjust the transmit power at both ends, more in poor signal areas, which is why your battery's drained faster, less in good signal areas. But it's also combined and displayed to you via the signal bars while you're on the call. So if you've ever seen the indicated signal strength change significantly when you're on a call, for example if you're on a hands-free, this is why. The estimate based on idle signal-to-noise ratio is replaced by a fairly accurate measurement of actual bit error rate.
What about the reports we've been seeing of dropped calls, for example on unbumpered iPhone 4s?
Well, if you detune your phone's aerial by, in the iPhone 4's case, physically connecting it to another different aerial on the same device, then your signal to noise ratio will take a nosedive and the bit error rate will skyrocket. And on any phone, if the error rate gets beyond a certain threshold, then the call or data session gets dropped.
It all sounds a little bit technical for the man in the street.
Yeah, a little knowledge of what's going on there can help. Just be aware of the physics behind the wonder that is mobile telecommunications, and you'll hopefully feel a lot happier about how your phone is coping with the situations that you put it in. You have to hand it to Motorola. They really are the most complete antithesis to Apple. Where the latter likes things elegant and pretty, Motorola go actually out of their way to see how ugly and awkward they can make every design, every single time. The Motorola XT720, or the Motorola in the Far East, is essentially the same as the existing Milestone, but with an upgraded camera and with a sliding keyboard lopped off. You'd have thought that taking away the hulking and awkward metal keyboard mechanism would have softened the XT720's lines, but, well, no, really. In fact, the designer has gone out of his way to make the device look like it still has a keyboard slide, by making the front and back of the device totally, utterly different. From the top, it's glossy metal glass. From the back, it's blue, rubberized plastic and steel. And the two halves meet round the edge with such a contrast that I just want to try pushing anyway, in case they slide apart to reveal something interesting. As usual, following Google's mantra of let's play a game with our users, the front face control icons have been shuffled again. There's a front bulge to house 3 blue status LEDs which light up in camera mode somewhat unnecessarily, but hey, they're still pretty. And a styled bulge on the rear here, ensuring enough depth for the 8 megapixel stills and HD video camera, of which more later, probably the star feature of the XT720 design. On the XT70's right side are a great camera shutter button and gallery shortcut key. On the back there's a great mono speaker, just as on the original Milestone, and under the cover an 8GB micro SD card as standard, which should get new users off to a flying start. Finally, on the top of the XT720, again giving credibility to its media ambitions, is an HDMI output port. It's the mini version, unlike on the upcoming Nokia N8, but there is an adapter cable in the box. Videos play as well as on the previous Milestone and take full advantage of that large 3.7-inch TFT screen. Ambient light permitting, of course. You see, the original Milestone's display more or less blacked out completely when you took the phone out in the sun. The XT720 has the same physical display but makes things worse with a mirror finish, especially noticeable on the screen surrounds. The result is an indoors or evenings only phone. It's a showstopper for me anyway, despite being the same toughened Gorilla Glass as its predecessor. Running this device is Android 2.1 with 2.2 promised for the near future. Well, hopefully. It's pretty functional already, and there are few surprises for anyone already used to stock Android. 5 home screens should be enough for most users, and Moto Blur is thankfully missing. The only tweaks on the XT720 are some extra virtual buttons here at the bottom of each home screen, and some additions to the drop-down menu. For example, to go quickly to music player. Talking of music, there's 3.5mm output through some fairly unremarkable earbuds, plus the usual Android competent video playback of most MP4 variants. Google Maps has the full free voice navigation, at least here in the UK. It's all very basic and robotic compared to the warmth in Nokia's Obby Maps voicings, but then maybe that's the droid element. A Cortex A8 powers the XT720, but it's hobbled at the moment, showing only 50 megabytes of free RAM after booting, clearly unsustainable. Plus it's underclocked to 550 megahertz. This is all right on the lower limit of what's acceptable for Android. I had several out-of-memory errors, and web browsing was often a lot jerkier than I remember with other Android phones. Rumour has it that a software update in the near future may restore the processor to 720 megahertz and magically unlock another 256 megabyte bank of RAM. Make sure you research this if you decide to get the XT720. The shipping specs seem different in some markets. Rather confusingly. The spec bump is vital. The battery's adequate at the same 1390 mAh as the original Milestone. It'll just about get you through a heavy day, but it will need charging every single night. It's tempting to say that the device's strengths lie elsewhere, specifically in the camera realm. There's a decent 8 megapixel stills camera with, wait for it, Xenon flash, the first Android-powered device to have this, and the first real competitor to the Xenon-equipped Symbian phones, the Nokia N82 and the Sony Ericsson Satio. Here are some sample pics. The photos were pretty good, though not as crisp as on the Nokia N86, for example, and I found focusing to be rather hit and miss. Still decent for an Android phone. There's a distinct shutter delay when using the Xenon flash, which may just ruin a good party shot. I focus and press the shutter, and there's a good 1 second before the Xenon flash fires. Also worth noting is that because the camera glass is unprotected, any tiny dirt, dust, grease or scratches on it will get shown up as flares when lighting a dark shot with Xenon, as shown here. Annoyingly, despite the dedicated camera button, you can't just take the XT720 out of your pocket and start snapping. You have to unlock the screen by pressing the power button, swipe the touch display, then long press the shutter button, all of which takes around 6 seconds by the time your subject may have gone. So this is test video capture on the Motorola XT720. Audio is very, very quiet. I've had to boost it significantly. As I pan round, you can see that the frame rate is rather jerky. There's also no pre-focus, no touch to focus, so you're focused on infinity and everything comes out rather blurry. That's close up. All in all, rather disappointing. Look, there are some positives here. It's thinner than the original Milestone, of course. The text input and form factor work generally pretty well. And the camera is the best I've seen in an Android phone, but I'm sorry, the team responsible for designing the hardware, from styling to screen technology to basic specification, they should be taken out and shot. Android 2.2 and a speed bump and RAM release and firmware might just save this device. Might. I give you the Motorola XT720.